The dense, fog-laden forest stretched as far as the eye could see, and in its depths, something ancient stirred. This was a place where human footsteps were rare, a terrain claimed long ago by the creatures that moved in the shadows. Few dared to venture this deep into the wilderness. Today, though, an unusual figure had found her way there, Ella. Ella was young, no more than 12, her face marked by a sharp intelligence that belied her age. Dressed in a worn leather jacket far too big for her slight frame, she had an air of calm that didn't fit with the towering woods around her. Her small hands clutched the edges of a moss-covered log, a momentary respite from the long hike she'd endured. Her breath was steady, and her heart, though beating fast, did not betray fear. That was because Ella had known the truth for a long time. She was never truly alone. The forest around her swayed with an unnatural tension, as though it knew what was coming. But she didn't flinch. It was at that moment the woods seemed to shift, the trees narrowing in a circle around her, and she felt their presence. Suddenly, from the dark underbrush, they emerged, two beings, unlike anything from Earth. On her left, an alien creature towered, its body sinewy and grotesque, skin rippling with muscles that pulsed under a leathery, almost reptilian surface. Its eyes, yellow and glowing like molten gold, locked onto her with an intensity that froze the air between them. Sharp fangs protruded from its maw, and its long, spindly fingers drummed against the forest floor as if it couldn't wait to pounce. But on her right, standing tall as a giant sentinel, was a creature just as imposing but far more familiar. A massive wolf, larger than any natural animal, its fur a stormy white, stood vigilant beside her. Its glowing eyes were identical to the creature on her left, both part of the same alien invasion, yet only one truly aligned with her. Ella's expression remained unreadable as she looked ahead, seemingly oblivious to the surreal standoff around her. The air crackled with tension, an eerie silence punctuated only by the soft breeze rustling through the trees. And that was when they struck. The aliens had underestimated her, and they had no idea that Ella wasn't alone. The invasion had begun quietly. No blinding lights, no flashy entrances, just a quiet shift in the world's balance. Aliens from a distant world had come to Earth, their presence barely noticed in the early days. They didn't attack cities or launch an obvious campaign of conquest. Instead, they infiltrated the shadows, slowly replacing key creatures across the planet with their own mutated creations. They were strategic, precise, and cunning. Their goal wasn't to rule humanity. It was to consume and replace the very life force of Earth itself. It started in places like these woods, where creatures went missing, and in their place, the aliens' twisted versions roamed, silent, predatory, and devastatingly intelligent. Ella had grown up hearing stories about the changes, but she never imagined she'd encounter them herself. But when her village was attacked, she knew the time had come to take action. Her family was taken, like so many others, by creatures that looked like wolves but were something far worse. These wolves hunted not for food, but to pave the way for something much more sinister. Ella had escaped that night, but not unscathed. She had been rescued by a being who had stayed hidden from human eyes for millennia, a guardian of sorts who had formed an unexpected bond with her. The enormous wolf now by her side was not of Earth's origin either, but it shared no allegiance with the alien invaders. It was a protector, loyal to something far older than the stars, bound to humanity in ways that Ella was only beginning to understand. As the alien on her left moved in with a sinister, almost predatory crawl, Ella raised her hand. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping rapidly. A connection, unseen but powerful, crackled between her and the creatures. The alien paused, cocking its head curiously. It sensed something strange about the girl, something that it hadn't expected in this frail human. Before it could act, the wolf lunged with a terrifying snarl, its massive paws crushing the earth beneath it as it collided with the alien. Their battle was violent, primal, and fast. The wolf, despite its size, moved with the grace of a predator born to hunt in the dark, its teeth gleaming as it clamped down on the alien's arm, forcing the creature to howl in pain. Ella stood still, her face emotionless, as the chaos unfolded around her. She knew better than to interfere, for her role in this was not as a fighter, but as something more. Her mind drifted to the time before she had met the wolf, those days of innocence and fear. But it was different now. Everything had changed. The wolf had chosen her, and in doing so, she had become part of something ancient, something that stretched beyond the mere conflicts of Earth. As the fight between the wolf and the alien escalated, Ella's focus remained sharp. She was not just a bystander. Her connection to the wolf was more profound than anyone would understand at first glance. She could feel its thoughts, its rage, and its purpose. It wasn't just a bond of loyalty. It was a symbiotic relationship, one forged through survival and understanding. She knew that they couldn't fail. Not now, not here. The alien's snarling face contorted in pain as the wolf's jaws tore into it, its body thrashing as it fought back with ferocity. But it wasn't just fighting the wolf, it was fighting Ella too. Through her link, she funneled her energy, her thoughts, guiding the wolf with precision. She wasn't just a scared little girl lost in the woods. She was a conduit, a strategist. A sharp crack echoed through the trees as the alien's twisted form hit the ground, lifeless and broken. The wolf stood over it, breathing heavily, its eyes glowing with intensity. Blood dripped from its fangs, but the victory was clear. Ella walked slowly towards the fallen creature, her footsteps calm and deliberate. She knelt beside the alien's body, her fingers gently brushing against its cold, leathery skin. There was no triumph in her face, no sense of accomplishment, only the solemn understanding that this was just the beginning. "I know you're watching," she whispered into the air, her voice soft but filled with determination. For a brief moment, the trees seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself had wavered. She wasn't speaking to the alien. She was speaking to the others, the ones still hidden, the ones who thought they could take Earth without resistance. "They'll come for us again," the wolf growled in her mind, its voice deep and familiar, echoing through their shared connection. "I know," Ella replied silently, "but they don't realize that we're ready." The silence in the forest felt heavier now. The corpse of the alien lay at Ella's feet, a grotesque heap of sinew and muscle, its yellow eyes dimmed and lifeless. The massive wolf stood beside her, its breath still ragged from the fight, but its gaze sharp, scanning the darkened woods for any sign of movement. The air tasted metallic, a bitter reminder of the battle that had just ended. Ella knelt beside the creature's body, her fingers tracing its strange, cold skin. It felt foreign, alien in every sense of the word, but in a strange way, familiar. She had seen creatures like this before, not in her village, not on Earth, but in dreams. Vivid, surreal dreams that had started the night her family had been taken. The connection between the wolf and herself had only grown stronger since then. But this creature was a different story. "I should feel something," she muttered to herself, barely audible. The wolf's ear twitched at the sound of her voice, its eyes turning towards her. "They're not like us," the wolf's voice echoed in her mind, low and reverberating. "They take what they don't understand. They destroy what they can't consume." Ella looked up, her eyes meeting the wolf's glowing gaze. For a second, she caught a glimpse of something deeply hidden behind those eyes. Sadness, maybe? No, it was too complicated for that. It was the weight of something that had lived for too long, fought too many battles. She wondered if the wolf felt the same numbness creeping in that she did, or if it had always known this world for what it was, a battleground, a series of conflicts without end. Her thoughts were interrupted by a low rumble in the distance, and the trees shuddered as if sensing danger. The wolf's hackles rose, and Ella stood quickly, her heart pounding. She wasn't scared, not really, but the anticipation, the uncertainty, it set her nerves on edge. "They're coming," the wolf growled. "They know we're here." Ella's eyes narrowed as she stepped back, standing beside the wolf, her hand brushing lightly against its fur for reassurance. There was no time to rest, no time to figure out what this alien was doing here, so far from any human settlement. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this particular encounter was just the tip of something much larger, something that had been waiting for her. Specifically, a voice echoed through the forest. "Cold, Metallic. Unfeeling. Human. Ella's body tensed. The voice wasn't coming from one direction. It reverberated all around her, filling the air like a low, droning hum. Human, it repeated. We have no quarrel with you. Ella clenched her fists. That was a lie, and she knew it. The village she'd come from, the people taken, the destruction left in the wake of these invaders. It had been deliberate, methodical. A cleansing. She knew better than to trust anything they said. But then, there was the irony. The same creatures who had ripped through her world, who had invaded the forests and turned nature into their playground, now sought to speak as though they could negotiate, as if their presence could be justified. They want you to believe there's a way out, the wolf said, its voice calm, knowing. There isn't. I know. Ella's voice was colder than she expected. The girl who had once been terrified in the face of these monsters was gone. Something else stood in her place. She didn't know if it was strength or just survival instinct. Maybe both. But she would never forgive. Never forget. The voice echoed again, this time closer. Surrender. And that's when Ella laughed. It was small at first, barely more than a breath, but it grew louder, sharper. There was something deeply unsettling about it, as if the very absurdity of the situation had finally hit her. She was standing in the middle of an ancient forest, bonded with a creature of myth, facing an alien race that wanted to consume everything she had ever known. And they wanted her to surrender? Her laughter died abruptly, her expression hardening. You don't get it, do you? The silence that followed was deafening. You think you're the predators here, she continued, her voice steady, cold. But you have no idea what you've stepped into. The air shifted, and the presence that had been so overwhelming moments ago faltered, just slightly. The aliens were watching her, but now they hesitated. Ella could sense their confusion, their fear. She wasn't supposed to react like this. She wasn't supposed to fight back. They don't know what we are, the wolf whispered, its massive frame stepping forward, muscles rippling under its fur. And then the ground trembled. A rumble, deep and distant, echoed beneath their feet, and Ella's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the forest responding, as though it had woken from a long slumber. The trees around them creaked and groaned, their roots curling through the earth like ancient tendrils. Something was shifting beneath the surface, something old, powerful. The wolf stepped back, eyes wide in recognition. It's starting. Ella swallowed, trying to maintain her composure. What's starting? The wolf's gaze remained fixed on the ground. The forest's call. Suddenly, the trees parted, and from the shadows emerged more figures, dozens of them. But these weren't like the grotesque creature they had just fought. These beings were sleek, agile, their bodies glowing with a faint blue light. They moved with purpose, their eyes fixed on Ella and the wolf, but there was no malice in their gaze, only a quiet understanding. They've been waiting for you, the wolf said, lowering its head. For us. Ella's breath hitched. What do you mean? But the wolf didn't answer. Instead, it stepped aside, allowing one of the blue-lit creatures to approach. The creature, tall and elegant, knelt before Ella, its glowing eyes meeting hers. There was a warmth in its gaze, a sense of recognition, and for a brief moment, Ella felt connected. They are not here to fight, the wolf said. They are here to protect. Ella's mind raced, struggling to comprehend the weight of what was happening. The aliens had invaded, twisted the world into something unrecognizable, but these beings, the ones glowing with light, they were different. They had been hiding in the forest, waiting for the right moment, waiting for her. The creature in front of her spoke, its voice soft but resonant. We are the guardians of this world. You are the one we've been waiting for. Ella took a step back, her heart pounding. Me? Why me? The creature tilted its head slightly. You are bonded with the guardian wolf. Together, you will be the key to restoring balance. The irony was not lost on her. Here she was, a girl who had once believed herself insignificant, now being told she was part of some ancient prophecy. It would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. I don't understand, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The creature's glowing eyes softened. You don't have to understand yet. You just have to trust. Ella bit her lip, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Trust? How could she trust anything anymore? Her world had been shattered, her family taken, and now she was being thrust into a conflict she didn't even fully understand. But then, she looked at the wolf beside her. Its steady presence, its unwavering loyalty, it had never led her astray. And deep down, she knew that if they were going to survive, if they were going to fight back, she had no choice but to trust. The creature rose to its feet, its gaze turning towards the forest. They will come again, and when they do, we will be ready. Ella nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. What do we do now? The creature's eyes glowed brighter, and for the first time, a small smile touched its lips. We prepare. They moved quickly after that. The wolf, the blue-lit creatures. Ella didn't fully understand what was happening, but there was a clear sense of urgency. The forest was alive with movement, the creatures darting between the trees, communicating in ways Ella couldn't quite comprehend. But she didn't need to. She could feel it in the air, the calm before the storm. As the night grew darker, Ella found herself standing at the edge of the forest, the weight of the world pressing down on her. The wolf stood beside her, its glowing eyes watching the horizon. You don't have to do this, you know, the wolf said, its voice unusually soft. You could leave, disappear, live a life away from all of this. Ella chuckled, though there was no humor in it. And where would I go? There's nothing left. The wolf didn't respond, but she could feel its thoughts, its understanding. It had seen this before. Humans pushed to their limits, forced to fight battles they didn't ask for. But this was different. This was her battle now. Suddenly, the air grew cold again, and a distant hum vibrated through the trees. Ella's heart raced as she turned towards the sound. They're coming, the wolf said, its voice tense. And Ella smiled, though the fear gnawed at her insides. Let them come. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. The creatures, the glowing blue beings who had appeared like apparitions, stood in the distance, watching, waiting. Ella could feel the weight of their gaze on her, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come to help, but they had no illusions. This was her fight now, and it had always been. Ella's hands tightened around the hilt of the knife she had pulled from her belt, her fingers trembling slightly. The wolf at her side watched her, its golden eyes unreadable, and for a moment, she could sense the quiet resignation in its thoughts. The wolf had seen battles like this before, had fought in wars that stretched back through the ages. But this was different. The hum of the alien voices grew louder, closer, as they advanced through the forest. Their numbers were growing, but Ella felt no panic. Her mind was racing, not with fear, but with clarity. For the first time, she understood. She could see it clearly now, the pattern, the logic behind everything that had happened. It had never been about domination. The aliens hadn't come to enslave humanity. They weren't even interested in ruling over the planet. They had come for something much simpler, something far more insidious. They wanted Earth's life force, not just the animals, not just the plants. They wanted the connection, the bond that tied the Earth's creatures to the planet itself. That was why they had tried to break the balance, why they had taken the wolves first. The wolves weren't just predators. They were protectors, guardians of the ancient bond between Earth and its inhabitants. And the aliens knew that if they could sever that connection, they could siphon the very essence of the planet, drain it dry, and move on to the next world. Ella's bond with the wolf wasn't an accident. It had been forged by the planet itself, a desperate last-ditch attempt to preserve what little balance was left. And that was why the aliens had come for her. They weren't after humanity, they were after the bond. And Ella had become the key to it all. They don't understand, Ella said softly, her voice steady. They think they can break it. The wolf's ear twitched, its eyes flicking toward her. What do you mean? Ella's eyes darkened. The bond. It can't be broken. The wolf tilted its head slightly, sensing something in her tone. You sound so sure. I am. Ella's grip on her knife tightened as the hum of the aliens grew louder, closer. They've been trying to take it, but they don't understand. They can't. The bond isn't something they can touch. The wolf growled low in its throat. They've taken everything else. They took the wolves, but they didn't break the bond, Ella said, her voice sharpening with realization. And that's why they're coming for me now. They think if they take me, they'll finally have what they need. But they're wrong. The wolf's eyes narrowed. You're certain of that? Ella nodded. I know it. The bond isn't something they can destroy. It's not something they can take. It's too deep, too old. The realization washed over her like a wave, and for the first time, Ella felt the weight of everything she had been through lift slightly from her shoulders. The bond was indestructible. It wasn't just something that could be taken or lost. It was part of the very fabric of the Earth. And that meant the aliens had already lost. They just didn't know it yet. The first of the aliens emerged from the trees, its yellow eyes glowing menacingly in the dim light. It was smaller than the creature they had fought before, but it moved with a quiet precision that sent a chill through the air. Behind it, more aliens appeared, their grotesque forms shifting through the underbrush like shadows. Ella took a deep breath, her heart steady. They're going to come for me, she whispered, her eyes never leaving the alien in front of her. And when they do, they're going to find out that they can't win. The wolf growled softly, its muscles tensing as it prepared for the inevitable fight. We fight them together. No, Ella said softly, her voice steady. We don't need to fight. The wolf glanced at her, confusion flickering in its golden eyes. What do you mean? Ella's gaze was fixed on the alien in front of her, her expression unreadable. They've already lost. They just don't know it yet. Without warning, the lead alien lunged forward, its long, twisted limbs reaching for Ella with terrifying speed. The wolf snarled, ready to leap into action, but Ella didn't move. She stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on the creature as it closed the distance between them. And then, just as the alien's claws were about to tear into her, something happened. The air around Ella shimmered, like the surface of a calm lake disturbed by a single drop of rain. The alien froze in midair, its yellow eyes wide with confusion. The other aliens behind it halted as well, their grotesque forms twitching as if they couldn't quite comprehend what was happening. Ella remained still, her expression calm. She could feel it now, the bond pulsing through her, through the wolf, through the very ground beneath her feet. The aliens had miscalculated. They had thought they could sever the bond, take control of it, but in doing so, they had only strengthened it. They had activated something ancient, something they couldn't control. They thought they could break it, Ella whispered, her voice soft but filled with a quiet certainty. But they've only made it stronger. The lead alien let out a guttural hiss, its body trembling as it struggled against the invisible force holding it in place. But it was too late. The bond had already reacted, protecting itself, drawing power from the Earth, from the wolf, from Ella. The aliens had triggered the one thing they had been trying to avoid, the full awakening of the bond. You can't take it, Ella said, her voice firm. It's not yours to take. And with that, the bond surged. The ground beneath the aliens rippled, the trees around them swayed, and the air itself seemed to hum with a strange, otherworldly energy. The aliens let out a series of shrieks and howls, their grotesque forms writhing as the bond rejected them, pushed them back. The wolf stood at Ella's side, its eyes glowing brighter than ever before. It's over, it growled, its voice low and final. Ella nodded. Yes, it is. The bond reached its peak, and with a sudden burst of energy, the aliens were flung backward, their bodies crashing into the trees and rocks with bone-shattering force. The creatures let out one final, collective shriek before their forms disintegrated, dissolving into the very air itself, leaving nothing behind but silence. Ella stood in the clearing, her chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. The forest around her was still once more, the bond quiet, its work done. The wolf padded over to her, its fur brushing against her leg as it came to a stop by her side. They're gone, the wolf said, its voice softer now, almost reverent. Ella nodded, her eyes scanning the forest, searching for any sign of the aliens. But there was nothing. They were truly gone. They can't come back. Not after this. The wolf tilted its head slightly. You did it. No, Ella said, her voice quiet. We did it. The wolf let out a soft huff, its eyes glowing warmly as it looked up at her. What happens now? Ella was silent for a moment, her thoughts swirling as she considered the question. The aliens were gone, the bond was safe, and the forest was still. But something in her heart told her that things would never be the same again. We go home, Ella said finally, her voice firm. The wolf blinked in surprise. Home. Ella nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Yeah, it's time to go home. The wolf was quiet for a moment, its golden eyes thoughtful. And then, slowly, it nodded. Home. Together, they turned and began walking through the forest, their footsteps silent on the soft earth. The bond still pulsed faintly around them, a reminder of the ancient connection that had brought them together. But there was no danger now, no threat. As they walked, Ella felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The battle was over. The aliens were gone. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. The wolf walked beside her, its head held high, its eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the forest. They didn't speak as they made their way through the trees, but they didn't need to. The bond between them was stronger than ever, unbreakable. Ella didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone. And she never would be.